live. Hi, friends. My name is Katya Gorbacheva, and we are, I think, on 8 streaming platforms today, which is kind of insane. I'm a former bodybuilder and right now powerlifter at TotalBodyLab. I want to thank Virtual Veg Fest Live and Triangle Veg Fest for supporting our bi-weekly stream. Thank you very much. And let me welcome our teammates. Some folks are late, but they will join here shortly. Hi, Michelle and Carol. And hi, Lydia. I cannot add you to the stream until you connect your mic and camera. Unfortunately, it doesn't allow me, but once you do that, I will add you. We have a special presentation from Julie today, who has prepared something about the environmental impacts of dietary choices. I looked through it and I'm very excited of what she has to say. But before we do so, we can catch up on the wins and challenges of the week. And here's Harsh. Lydia, connect your microphone, please, so I can add you to the stream. Alrighty, who wants to go first on how the last week has been?
You. So I'll go first.
Let's do it.
This past week has been fine. Had a little tweak to my back, but modified my workouts, so still got them in. So that's a win.
I'm sorry, that happens.
Yeah.
I don't really know what positives I have. I guess I'm still just getting back into it. I'm actually lifting some heavier weights and doing enough that I'm actually sore, which is kind of nice, and not too sore that I can't move, but sore enough that I know I did something, which is the good kind of sore. So I guess that's where I've been good on my water intake, at least this week. So I guess
was your water intake not good before? You always are on top of your water.
I mean, sometimes I do better. Like on Thursdays, I hardly ever do very good. Like I haven't even gotten a half gallon in today because I was in the office and I don't drink as much when I'm in the office. But besides today, like every day this week, I've gotten my gallon in. So, and that's all I do. I drink coffee in the morning and then water for most of the rest of the day. So, so I'm okay with it. I can get 3/4 of a gallon easy. It's getting that extra quarter gallon in that I struggle with.
I got you. Yeah, the last little bit. That makes sense. Harsh is like, oh, speaking of which, let me just drink some water. How are you, Harsh?
Last week I was sick. Wait, is there someone else joining?
I'm sorry, I have a hard time hearing you.
Can you hear me? Am I just
Yes.
Okay. First, is someone else joining?
Yes, Lydia should be joining us, and Julia is presenting.
Cool.
Julie, I'm sorry, I'm a little scatterbrained today. Julie's presenting. Her internet has been out, so she's been fixing it. So she will join in a moment. And then we are streaming on extra platforms today because we're not just talking about like lifting and stuff. Julie has a presentation on the environmental effects of dietary choices. So we're also on Veg Fest Expos, Triangle Veg Fest, Virtual Veg Fest Live on YouTube and Facebook, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah. Well, we can still talk lifting and all of our other normal stuff.
Yeah. So on those notes, last week I had a cold and it was an interesting experience. I didn't want to skip my workouts, so I did them while on Tylenol. And man, if you guys want a cheat code, that's it. Do that. Because I didn't feel myself. I didn't feel myself getting sore. I just pushed and pushed and pushed, and I was like, oh yeah, this is fine. Because it was. And then eventually I started recovering and I stopped taking Tylenol, and then it was just like, oh shit, I'm sore. And it was just a bunch of stretching after that. But yeah, so I did that. That was fun. Made me feel a little bit invincible. It was pretty great, frankly. Probably not the best thing to do, but I don't know if it is, honestly. Maybe it is the best thing to do. I don't know. Anyways, it felt great. I don't know if I should be saying these things, but this is what happened.
You're just sharing your own experience, and yeah, that makes sense that you're less sore if you've been taking anti-inflammatory things.
Yeah. What else happened? Yeah, really, that's about it. I skipped a workout unintentionally, and that upset Alexei. But alas, this is something that happened. Yeah, that's it. I don't know. I'm happy I made my deadlifts yesterday.
Yeah, they look good. Yeah, I feel you on the cold. I got a cold 2 days ago, and I was supposed to test my heavy squats and heavy deadlifts.
Tylenol, telling you, it works.
Tylenol.
Yeah, or whatever. Some kind of paracetamol, acetaminophen. I don't really care. That's a drug. Take it. You won't feel shit. And you can do things.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I only took Dayquil so far because it's not like that bad. I'll see if I have any Tylenol.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has acetaminophen. That's a drug. That's the active ingredient.
I'll read the ingredients. I'll make a note. Interesting advice from Harsh. Take some acetaminophen and go lift. Well, I'm glad you've recovered. I went to the sauna to try to recover, and I think it's helped a little bit. But yeah, unfortunately, I also skipped 2 workouts, which doesn't feel good. 2.5 weeks out from the meet, but what are you gonna do? So yeah. I guess Lydia is having trouble with her microphone, and I don't know if she's able to join us, but it's being recorded, so she will be all right. So we are just waiting on Julie, who should be able to join us shortly to present.
Can't you let her in and then she can just put stuff in chat?
I'm sorry?
Can't you let Lydia in and let her just use chat?
I couldn't hear. Can she use the chat if you're asking?
Yeah, let her in and let her type stuff.
I know she's not here.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't let me add her to the stream if her microphone and camera are not working. I don't know why, but yeah, I would let her. It's not my platform, unfortunately. Cool. Well, while we're waiting on Julie, maybe we can do some little Q&As. It's been a while. A lot of things have happened. So yeah, why don't we do that?
What does this mean?
Oh, just Q&A if you have any questions for me or Lydia is here. Yes, she's putting on comments. Yes, we can see you. That's funny. Cool.
Damn it, what was that?
Say that again.
I said, there was something I was thinking about I wanted to ask the other day, but I can't remember what it is now.
And it went out of your head. Yeah, that happens to me all the time. Well, while you're thinking, I'll remind the local folks that there is a Raleigh pop-up market this weekend, this Sunday. And thank you so much, Michelle and Carol and T3 for volunteering. I think David is going to be there. Harsh had plans, so boo. But the majority of the local crew is going to be here, which is really cool. I think it's going to be a fun event.
Okay, Q&A. Oh shoot. I don't know if this is even a thing to ask, but I'm asking. So yeah, okay. So if I think about it, it's mid-July. I don't know, something like mid-July. Okay, yeah, mid-July. I think I started lifting with you I don't know. I want to say like mid-November, something like this.
Yeah, October, November. Uh-huh.
And thinking, oh, Julie's here. Hi. Thinking just like progress made in said time. Well, whatever. I made some progress on my lifts in this time. Let's take, I don't know, let's take benches for example. So like, I think, what is it, like 9 months or 8 months or something? 8 months, maybe my one rep max has gone up by, let's say, 40 pounds.
Yeah, your bench has improved the most.
Sure. So let's say it's 40 pounds now. Do you think such a rate of progress is one sustainable to
Absolutely not. Probably not.
fuck.
Yeah. I don't want for you to get too excited. I mean, look at your rate of progress with deadlift, and you've been deadlifting for far longer than you've been benching, right?
Right. What's
Right.
your point?
Your deadlift progress is a lot smaller percentage-wise. So every year you can half your rate of progress at best. And then the next year it's half of that, and next year it's half of that.
Okay, let's
This
not
year-
talk percentage. Let's talk pounds, right? Like the same pound increase. I guess you're saying the percentage decreases, but okay.
I would rather talk percentage. I think percentage makes more sense because pounds to me are not the same pounds to a
Whatever.
guy.
Yeah. Okay. So you want to talk percentage? What do you think?
Yeah. Sorry, Harsh. I wish I could add 40 pounds on bench every year, but that's not happening. That would be so cool.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's all.
Don't want to get you too excited. I mean, you're still very young, and like, I guess, how many years have you been lifting? 1 year, 2, 3?
See, there's different things. Lifting, very vague. How long have I been doing biceps? I don't know. 1 month, 2 months. Like really, not often. How long have I been doing benches? I don't know. Like maybe 3 years, 2 years. I don't know. And how long have I been doing deadlifts? Maybe 6 years. So depends on what you call lifting. I can tell you how long I've been doing it.
Right. Well, kind of like more powerlifting style, as frequent and as heavy as you've been doing it, right? Not like just bro lifting, but even if it was like bro lifting, you look at guys who have been doing it since they were 17, their progress is like smaller percentage wise than somebody who has never been doing anything, and they come into the gym at 30 and they're like, they're just growing, because they have less mileage. They don't, they haven't used their bodies as much. So now it's like adapting really quickly, but your body adapts really well to load, to volume, to loading, to everything. So every time you need to add more for it to grow more, for you to grow stronger. So yeah.
Fine.
Oh, well, good question though. Julie, hi. Congratulations on your new job. Thank you for getting to us, and thank you for making the presentation. Would you share some wins with us before you dive into your very exciting data?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. I feel like it's been a while. Is it super echoey? No, just a little. Okay, I'm in a very empty room right now. Yeah, so I guess my big win is that I finally started a new job position after months and months of trying to find some place that seemed cool. So yeah, I started there last week. It's a solid state battery company. So they're actually working on making a very sustainable and yeah, there's a lot of innovations going on in the battery world. So it's a really cool place so far. The people are really awesome. And my boyfriend and I moved into a rental house from our small apartment. Now we're in a house. So I have a whole basement that's full of lifting equipment. So I'm super excited to get back to like legit powerlifting. And yeah, that's pretty much my big wins. So I have not been lifting really at all or consistently over the past few weeks because I've been sick and there's been some, pretty big life events happening. So I'm really excited this week to get back to it. So.
Michelle and Kara, please don't get sick. I feel like you're the only ones who are still like holding strong. Everybody's been sick.
You just
Yeah,
jinxed
don't
us.
jinx us.
We're probably both going to get sick now.
One of my new coworkers is actually a powerlifter, and he's actually heard of you, Katya. He competes at USAPL.
Oh, what's his name?
So, his name is Dustin. I forget his last name. I haven't known him that long.
Okay.
But I'll have to send you his name, so maybe you know him too.
That's awesome. Yeah. Small world.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, congrats on everything. You have a lot going on, and I wouldn't feel bad about not having lifted at all, Julie. Like,
Thank
you need a break, you need a vacation, you need to recover, and we can just go in headstrong after that. Well, let me know if you can share your screen if you're ready to present.
Cool. All right, I will try. Present. Slides. Oh, I have to upload a file. Okay.
I have never let other people present. I also have your presentation pulled up. If you want for me to just open it, I can do that.
I sent you the PDF, I think, and I have a lot of like animation type things in the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
But it looks like it's almost done uploading, so that's good. I also just got internet at this house like 2 hours ago, so I'm really glad.
That's incredibly impressive.
It all worked out.
Cool.
Okay. It says it's processing it, so I'm not sure what that means.
Sweet. Let me try to make you a presenter and see what happens.
Okay.
Oh, wow. That's very big. Okay. That didn't do it.
Okay, it says the slides are uploaded.
Great.
So
Also, I have a box of soda, and after reading your presentation, I'm going to feel really shitty about drinking it.
oh, it's all good. Okay, I'm trying to present now. Let's see. Hopefully it works.
So I feel like I'm presenting now because I'm just making your file the main thing. So if you need me to click next slide, I can do that.
It looks like it's cut off. It looks
Oh,
like
you're doing it. Great.
Oh, am I doing it? Oh, good.
You're doing it? Yes, you totally are.
Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, it looks like the first slide is cut off, but the second one looks fine. So we'll just keep going. So the title is The Environmental Impact of Dietary Choices. And, my whole goal with this is actually a presentation I've been wanting to put together for a long time anyway. I've been in sustainability for a few years now, kind of at an amateur level, and now I'm kind of doing it for my job. So I know folks were really interested in like getting some serious data about like carbon footprints and all of that kind of stuff of different types of food. So there's a ton of that in here. So I'm just going to try to get through it in about 20 minutes. So what's this presentation about? So obviously the name of the presentation is the environmental impact of your dietary choices. And so the whole point is to just inform you about how your food choices affect your environmental impact, right? So what you eat, how it affects your carbon footprint, your water use, and land use as well. So it's, lots of information. I'm here to give you the information. I'm not here to judge. I don't know if everybody is vegan. I'm vegan, so I want to be very upfront about that. But I know that some folks who are, probably going to watch this on YouTube aren't vegan. And so, this is geared towards people who have a range of dietary choices. So there's no judgment here about what people choose to eat or not eat. It's just, a little bit of information to help you make some your own decisions, a little bit of recommendations. But again, you know, some people can't eat certain things for various reasons, and that's totally fine. So a little bit about me, just so you know, I won't go through this line by line. This is really just to say that I have a background in science and engineering, a pretty extensive background. I'm working on a master's degree in sustainable engineering right now, which is focused on food sustainability and sustainable technologies. I also have a PhD in geology, and I'm an aerospace engineer as well. So I worked at NASA for a long time, and recently transitioned, like I said, over to a battery company called Zakuro, and working on sustainable tech. I love, you know, in terms of my passions, I love low impact living. So low environmental impact, that is. So eating vegan, sustainable practices. So a lot of like zero waste type stuff, how to decrease your personal carbon footprint. Those are things I'm really interested in. I'm also really interested in wildlife photography and nature. So like this, you'll see some of my bird pictures throughout the presentation, and some of my other animal pictures. So, oh yeah, Katya has my calendar. So yay. Thanks, Katya. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about you know, the specifics, like what does environmental impact actually mean? So there's a lot of different ways you can actually describe environmental impact, and it doesn't look like my animations are working. So so I'll just have to talk through some of this. So there's a lot of different ways to actually define environmental impact. You can obviously talk about carbon footprint. You can talk about biodiversity. You can talk about political and social ramifications, for example, equality and equity, land use, pollution, all kinds of things. The big things that I'm going to talk about in this presentation are carbon footprint, water use, and land use, in particular in regards to certain aspects of agriculture. So I could talk about all of this for hours and hours, but we obviously don't have an infinite amount of time. So that's kind of how I'm defining environmental impact right now. So we talk about, you know, carbon footprint. What does that actually mean? So the Carbon Trust has a really good definition that I like. Carbon footprint is the total greenhouse gas emissions caused either directly or indirectly by an individual, organization, event, or product. And so then the natural next question for folks who aren't familiar with this is, okay, well, what's a greenhouse gas and why do I care? So greenhouse gases are typically the main three are obviously carbon dioxide. That's the one that people talk about the most, but it also includes methane. So I don't know if you can see my cursor at all, but methane is that, that one in the middle with kind of the white edges. So methane is actually 80 times more potent. That's 80 times more potent a greenhouse gas than CO2. So it's incredibly powerful at trapping heat in the atmosphere. Also, nitrous oxide is another one. So when we look at the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere over time, you can see here that starting in 1960, it was around 318 or so, 320 parts per million, all the way to the 2020s, where we're now at 420 parts per million. So it's essentially gone up by 100 parts per million, which is incredibly, incredibly fast. So and the question is, okay, well, this is a greenhouse gas. It traps heat. We've added more of it to the atmosphere. What's the effect on the atmosphere and on our planetary temperature? So you can see here sorry, I forgot about this one. So you could see the speed with which the CO2 has gone up over time. So in the 1700s, you could see it was in the 200s ppm. And starting in like the late 1800s or so, which is really when the Industrial Revolution started, when we started burning coal, doing a lot of other like factory scale, industrial scale types of industries, we started putting a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And you can actually see that here to the point where now, you know, we're in the 400s. So really in the last century or so, we've seen a very rapid increase in CO2. And so if you go even further back in time, so now we're talking about hundreds of thousands of years ago, people will argue and they'll say, oh, well, this is a normal increase in CO2 because of orbital cycles and because of, the different interglacial periods and ice ages and things like that happening. And you can see hundreds of thousands of years ago, there have been increases in CO2 up to the 200s. This star way, way, way up here actually shows the 2021 CO2 level. So we are way above the max for any previous warm period, interglacial period in Earth's history. And so you can see in the past century or so, back to like the 1800s or so, this blue here, so on this chart on the right, you can actually see it was a lot cooler than the average. So if you took the 1901 to 2000 temperatures on Earth and you averaged them and called that normal, how far are we away from that average? That's essentially what this chart is showing. So in like the 1930s or so, and before that, we were below the average, so we were cooler. And then we started kind of going above it periodically. And then in like the 80s, we started going way, way, way up. And so when I was talking about adding all of that CO2 and those greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, we can see that those greenhouse gases are doing what greenhouse gases do. They're trapping heat in the atmosphere, and we can see our temperature going up. So the temperatures have gotten so high, I'm sure a lot of you saw on the news that we've been breaking world records. Literally historical records for the hottest days happened multiple times. At the time I was working on this presentation, which was just a couple weeks ago, and we're probably going to break these records again. So it's been incredibly hot, and we can see the heat continuing, and there are effects of that. So one of the big things is drought. So as temperatures get warmer, some of our more sensitive locations in the United States are getting quite a bit dried out because of the heat. Some of my text got a little bit messed up here, but you can see on this map these places with the kind of like peach color and orange colors. Those are like moderate drought. And then those places with the really intense red, those are extreme drought. And so it turns out that a lot of these places that have drought, if you look at this chart on the right, they also are places where most of our food gets grown. So the places with the highest agricultural production in the United States are also the places that are getting hit by drought due to climate change. And so this is a drought map for June 2023. And so you can look at this for future months and see the drought intensifying, and it's a little bit scary. So when we talk about agriculture and we talk about greenhouse gases due to agriculture, how much greenhouse gases does agriculture actually add to the atmosphere? Well, globally, of all the greenhouse gases that go into the atmosphere, about 26% of them come from agriculture. And so we talk about, agriculture, we're talking about like the supply chain of transporting foods back and forth, packaging them up. We're talking about livestock and fisheries, which I'll get into. We're talking about crops that are grown to feed livestock, crops that are grown to feed humans, and then also the land that gets used and the actual carbon emissions that come from using that land. So that was globally. So when we zoom in a little bit to the United States, this is a pie chart showing the carbon emissions in the United States. And so you can see that compared to these other industries like transportation, power, industry, which is like cement production and a bunch of other things, along with commercial and residential, agriculture is 10%. But there are some papers that actually show that depending on how you define agriculture, like if you include chemicals that are used for fertilizer, for example, and other things, if you count those as agriculture, that number can get as high as 32%. So 1/3 of our national carbon emissions could be coming from agriculture, depending on how you define it. One of the things that I totally forgot to mention is that you'll see these little like footnote numbers in, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but like this little 8 here at the end, that's actually a reference to a paper. So at the end of this presentation, I have a list of all the papers and everything that I got this information from. So I can send you guys a PDF of this if you want to like read more, because there's a ton of information that I'm not presenting that's in these papers. But this is just to let you know that I'm not making this stuff up, which I would never do that. Okay, so now let's zoom in a little bit more. So we talked about globally, we talked about the United States, and now for a single household, there was one paper that showed, depending on the size of your household, depending on your income and the number of family members you have, up to 30% of your household carbon emissions can also be the result of your food choices. So what you're eating. So we talk about agriculture as an industry, but agriculture is all about feeding people. And so those food choices actually make an impact when you go up from the scale of the household to the nation to the world. That actually contributes to those bigger emissions. And so now we think, okay, well, up to 30% of our household carbon emissions come from food choices. What foods contribute the most and what foods contribute the least? And so this is a chart. Oh man, my font just got really jacked up. Sorry, this actually fit better when I had it on my screen. But you can see this just fine. So this is a chart that actually shows the greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram of different types of foods. And so the biggest thing you can see right off the bat, and I have it here in big font, is that beef is actually more than twice the carbon emissions of the next highest emitting food. So beef is almost 100 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of food that's produced. And then you go down and there's lamb. There's also dairy beef. So that's the third one. Cheese, eggs, milk, and so on. So 9 of the top 10 emitters are either meat or some kind of animal product like eggs or milk. The highest non-animal emitter or plant-based emitter is rice. So unfortunately, I haven't had time to look into rice and find out exactly why, but I can definitely look into that if you're interested. Not to crap on rice or anything, but it's important to be honest that there is a plant item that is in that top 10. Okay, so why does beef have such high emissions? I'm actually going to get into beef a little bit because I think Caitlin had some questions about like the Amazon and why deforestation is happening there and some other questions. So I'm going to get into beef a bit because I want folks who are watching this who eat beef to get the information about, if somebody comes at them and says, oh, beef is bad, well, first of all, that's a subjective term, but you can say quantitatively beef has the highest carbon emissions of other types of food. And really, it comes down to the cow physiology. So cows, like, not to be impolite or whatever, but cows burp and they fart. That's what they do. And their burps and their farts are full of methane. And that methane, remember how I mentioned before, methane is 80 times more potent at trapping heat than carbon dioxide. So when you have a ton of cows and they're eating and they're burping and they're farting, they're producing a lot of methane. And you can actually see this in satellite data. You can actually see the intense methane emissions from factory farms and from places where there's substantial numbers of cows. There's also methane emissions from other animals. And so you can see them here. Again, some of this got cut off a little bit, but even chickens produce some. So, that's definitely something to be aware of. When we talk about land use, so beef actually has a really huge impact on land. So this is just a map showing the different locations of land in the world where food can be grown. And so 33% of the world's agricultural area is actually dedicated to producing food for livestock. So not for people, but for livestock. So 30% of the non-frozen land is actually used for surface grazing. So for cows and cattle and livestock, chickens, other things, other animals to eat. And so that's a pretty substantial amount of land in the world that's used for livestock, for them to live and for them to eat. I know in terms of the rainforest, there's some pretty big implications there as well. So 72% of the Brazilian rainforest, the deforestation that happens in the rainforest, is actually for the purpose of cattle ranching. So when we talk about deforestation and the impact on the environment, I know that I think Caitlin said that someone told her that, oh, well, deforestation is actually just to grow soy. And so people who eat soy are contributing to deforestation. Well, it turns out most of the deforestation is for cattle ranching. 18% of it is for soy production, but 73% of that soy is actually for livestock. So most of the soy that's grown on deforested rainforest land is actually for livestock and not for humans. So it's a pretty substantial impact when we talk about deforestation. Because remember, rainforests and these other natural areas, they take CO2 out of the atmosphere. So when you start cutting trees down and you start deforesting, that's essentially removing a way to get rid of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere. So it's a very big environmental impact. So I did some math. I was actually really curious about, because a lot of people have told me that, oh, well, we need cattle to eat all that because we couldn't eat the plants by themselves. It wouldn't be enough food to feed all the people. So we need to feed it to cows and eat the cows so that we can feed people. And I see your face, Katya. And so I wanted to know, quantitatively, is that true? So what I did was I actually compared the calories that are produced from the amount of plants a cow eats over its lifetime to the amount of calories that are produced from a cow. And so 62% of a single cow is harvested, quote unquote, for edible food. So that's most of the cow that's used for food. If you assume that a cow weighs 1,100 pounds, it eats about 30 pounds of feed every day. Over an average 2 years life, that equates to about 22 tons of plant matter. So 22 tons of plants go into making, quote unquote, one cow that a person eats. And we only eat 62% of that. But cows are very calorie dense. So plants, and I use soy for this number, has a calorie density of 667 calories per pound of soy. Beef has a calorie density of 1,152 calories per pound. So it has about twice the density beef does relative to soy. But over a lifetime, if you add up that 30 pounds of feed every day for 2 years, and you compare that to the amount of calories you get from 62% of one cow, it turns out that you only get 5.3% of the calories that went into that cow are what you get out of it. So that is a pretty huge difference. And I invite anyone who's watching, double check my math. I did this math on my own. I went and looked these numbers up on my own, but it's a pretty substantially low number. Even if it was 10%, that's still, quite a bit lower than what you would be getting if you just ate the plants directly. Oh man, I'm sorry. This slide got messed up. So what I was going to talk about in this slide
was point. I checked your math. So a ton is not 1,000 pounds. A ton is 2,000 pounds. 2,400 pounds. A ton is 1,000 kilos. And so your 22 tons was 11 tons or 10 tons.
Okay, so okay. Yeah, and I'll definitely check it. Yeah, and even if it's double, right? Because a kilo is about 2.2 pounds. It's still 10%, or I guess it would be more like 12 or 13% probably, that you would get from eating the cow versus the plants. But yeah, thank you for checking that. Yeah. So this slide was actually about water. And so this is a picture of the Colorado River. And so most of the water that is actually, most of the crops that are grown in the American Southwest are actually primarily alfalfa. And so alfalfa is actually used to make hay, among other things, to feed cattle and to feed livestock, not just cattle, but other livestock. And so it's a very water intensive crop. And so unfortunately, the Colorado River is actually incredibly low. Its water level is very, very low. And so the effect of that is that we've actually had a lot of issues in terms of getting enough water to various places along the Colorado River in the American Southwest. Now, it turns out that 41% of the alfalfa that's actually grown in Arizona and California is actually shipped overseas. And so there are places overseas where they have livestock, they have horses, they have other animals that they're feeding the alfalfa to, where it's actually illegal in some places to grow alfalfa because it's so water intensive. So there are desert places that are very arid where they don't grow alfalfa. So they just buy it from the United States. So we're in essence shipping a lot of our Colorado River water overseas. So now the Colorado River levels are critical. There's a lot of efforts going on to preserve the water in the Colorado River upper basin and lower basin in particular. And so when you add it up, 50% of the Colorado River's water is in support of the livestock industry, which is pretty substantial. And this is just a quick plot that shows the water use by crop. And you can see alfalfa is way up here. It's actually the highest one. You can also see almond is up here too. I know almond is something that gets a lot of flack for water consumption, and it does use quite a bit of water as well. There is, I don't know if you guys know Mike the Vegan. He actually has a really great video summarizing the whole Colorado River kind of issues and surrounding the agriculture industry and the cattle industry. So Something is Drinking 50% of the Colorado River's Water is the name of his video. So I highly recommend, if you want to know more about that, go check out that video. I think it's one of the best videos on his whole channel. It's really good. Okay, there was a chicken here. So when we talk about alfalfa being consumed by livestock, that doesn't just include cattle, it also includes chickens. And actually chickens are actually the highest consumers of alfalfa. And so when we talk about chicken impact on the environment, they do have a carbon footprint that's pretty high up there, you saw on that chart. But they also consume quite a bit of water in the form of alfalfa as well. This one also got cut off, dang it. So this is a chart that shows the CO2 equivalents per person per day for different types of diets. And the reason I wanted to show this plot is because it actually shows the impact of reducing your meat consumption. So this was a paper, they actually quantitatively added up how much meat versus dairy you can eat and what effect it would have on your carbon footprint. And there's no vegan anything going on in this plot. At the high end, they looked at people who ate 70% of their diet was meat and 11% was dairy. And then at the low end, they looked at people who ate 27% meats and 28% dairy. And the reason they picked these numbers was to kind of reflect what the average person eats. And so, obviously the average person is not vegan or vegetarian. And so you don't see any of that on this plot. But what's really cool is that you can reduce your meat consumption and you can make substantial decreases in your carbon footprint. So you can see here the people who eat the most meat are way, they're way high up here in terms of their carbon footprint. If you go down this plot, these people in this group are in the, they're eating, 27% meat on average in this little group. And so you can get your carbon footprint quite low if you just reduce your meat consumption. So I think that's pretty cool. And so if you're someone out there who's like, oh, I don't, I'm not ready to go vegan or whatever, you can still reduce your meat consumption and make a very big positive effect on your carbon footprint. But if you decide to eliminate animal-based food entirely, this yellow text that is really hard to read, again, sorry for the formatting problems, 61%. So from the average that the average American eats, 61%, sorry, you can have a 61% reduction in your greenhouse gas emissions by going plant-based. So that is actually huge. And, obviously if you still eat plants, you are going to have a positive carbon footprint. That's just the nature of being a living, breathing organism. But you can have a much lower carbon footprint if you switch to a plant-based diet. This paper also looked at land use, and they said that if former croplands and pastures were rewilded, which means that if they were allowed to return to their natural state, either forests or prairies or wetlands or whatever, another 98.3 billion tons of CO2 would be removed by the end of the century. And that's because those plants do a great job of sucking that CO2 out of the atmosphere and trapping it in the ground or trapping it in themselves over the long term. So that's pretty cool. I don't think that's realistic for the world to do something like that, but it shows you the potential for places that used to be used for agriculture. If we allow them to return to their natural state, they can be very effective. This one's for you, Katya. Yeah. So, if you already, eat a vegan diet and you want to reduce your carbon footprint in a dietary way, wine and beer are very, very carbon intensive. I say this as someone who just had a beer not that long ago. So, we don't drink wine and beer as much as we eat different animal products. At least we shouldn't. I hope you're not drinking that much. That's not healthy in other ways. But also carbonated drinks have a relatively high carbon footprint. So there are things you can reduce. But again, we're getting into the very low levels of CO2 emitted. And again, you are going to have some carbon footprint as a person, and you do have to eat some food to stay alive. So, this is just kind of if you really want to get into the details.
Sorry, what is this? I don't understand. What do you mean by per kilo of food? Okay, so this is like 1 kilo of beer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ah.
So, and that's just so they're all scaled to the same amount, but you're not going to be having, hopefully not a kilo of wine or beer every day, right?
I don't even know what that is. Like, I'm just thinking, what is a kilo of beer? I have not good intuition about this. Is that a 6-pack? Not that I'm having this, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lydia has a question, by the way.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I do see it. Do you have data on the different types of plant-based milks? Yes, I do. That's coming up. Good question. So yeah, I will get to that question in just a couple minutes. Yes. Yeah. I think there was a unit conversion issue on that one. So yeah, I'll go back and check that one for sure and make sure I've got the kilos to pounds thing. Yeah, thank you. Also, anything containing palm oil. I know a lot of people talk about palm oil from an animal rights standpoint, but also palm oil contributes to deforestation, which has a substantial carbon impact as well. And so the rainforests in Indonesia that are being cut down, they are great at taking CO2 out of the atmosphere. So if they get cut down, that's CO2 that we're not able to suck up anymore, unfortunately. To reduce your water impact, again, this is just general, eat less nuts, avocados, cocoa, coffee, oils, and sweet spices. The spices are actually the highest one, which I think is very interesting. But again, you have to think about how much of these you're eating every day, right? Like I'm not eating a kilogram of cinnamon or vanilla every day. So again, this is just for awareness, really. For me, for coffee, I think that's a big one for me. Okay, plant-based milks, here we are. So this is a great paper. This is one that came out, and you could see at the bottom of the slide, I'm pointing at it with my finger, I don't know why. But you can see at the bottom of the slide, there's a reference, but they look at the environmental impact of different plant-based milks. So dairy milk is the one at the top, and then going down, it's rice milk, soy milk, oat milk, and almond milk. So they looked at carbon emissions, they looked at land use, so how much land is needed to grow the same amount of each food. And then same thing for water, how many liters of water are used to grow the same amount of each of these milks. And so you can see here, dairy milk is the highest one, but almond milk actually has a very substantial water impact as well. You can see rice milk has a relatively high carbon footprint. And again, I talked about rice itself having a high carbon footprint. So that kind of trends here. One thing that I did not get, I couldn't find any data on pea milk. So I don't know where pea milk falls in this. And I am a pretty big pea milk drinker myself because it's very high in protein. But if you look at the greenhouse gas emissions and the land use and the water use for peas, just as a crop by themselves, it seems to be in the same realm as soy milk and oat milk. So I would estimate, and this is based off of my kind of just really quickly comparing those numbers, it seems to be in the same realm as soy milk and oat milk. So, for me, when I'm going to like a cafe or coffee shop or whatever, and I'm trying to choose a plant-based milk, which is awesome that I can choose nowadays, I generally choose soy milk or pea milk because they have protein. But if they don't have that, then I would probably go for oat milk because it has the least impact across the board for all three, and it's delicious. So hopefully that answers your question. I also, one thing I personally was wondering about is like, fake meats and plant-based proteins. And so there has been some studies looking at like Beyond Burger as like a specific brand. I wasn't able to find anything about like Impossible or like every single brand that's out there. So if you use Beyond as kind of like a representative of what the kind of relatively unhealthy plant-based proteins look like, it has 90% less greenhouse gas emissions than the equivalent amount of beef. 46%, it uses 46% less energy to make. This is worded very strangely, but I'm directly quoting them. It uses less than 1% of the water that beef does, and it has 93% less impact on land use than a quarter pound of US beef. Tofu has 1/5 the emissions of the equivalent amount of beef, and veggie patties and falafel and corn and tempeh, they were all the same. I found a really detailed, crazy spreadsheet with their actual carbon emissions. These were actually the same, and they're about 2% that of the same amount of beef. So hopefully that helps in terms of like plant-based proteins to help understand, carbon emissions associated with those. So I've taken way too much time, but this is my last slide. These are Canada geese and babies. What are some other general recommendations that I would make just as somebody who's interested in sustainability? If you're somebody who wants to decrease your carbon emissions, and it's very important to you, the number one thing I would say is to vote. Vote for candidates that support climate action, that supporting the environment in various ways. I would also say, if you're someone who's trying to, not like make better food choices, the first thing I would do is shop your own kitchen. So if you're going to be cooking something, it's way better to use what you have than to go and buy something new. And I'm actually wearing my special shirt today. It says "Make food, not waste." And because food waste is actually a huge source of carbon emissions as well. I would also say switch to a climate-friendly bank. So a lot of big banks actually invest in fossil fuel companies, I should say. And so they have a lot of carbon emissions associated with just how you store your money. Buy locally, switch to renewable power if you can, and then talk about climate with others. Like just talking about it and having that awareness built up actually makes a huge difference. And it makes people aware of things that they may not have thought about before. So anyway, that was my presentation, and I'm going to finish, with a red-winged blackbird. So hopefully that was informative and answered some of the questions that you all had.
Thanks, Julie. That's awesome.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm sorry, some of your things got a little scattered because of the formatting.
It's all good.
Lydia says, thank you. I hadn't heard of pea milk, but personally opt for oat. I'll have to check pea milk out. There's so many different types of plant milks that have appeared. Like now, Plant Built is sponsored by a company that makes Bam Nut milk and Bam Nut noodles that are kind of like instant noodles, except they're so much better for the environment and for your health. And, but there's not a lot of companies doing the same. Does anybody have questions? Because I have so many questions, but I'll let y'all go first.
Yeah, and you can also, I'll post these slides in our like team chat, and you can also just message me. That's fine
Okay.
too.
Thank you so much. Can you go back a couple slides and I'll remember my questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
This
So
one?
no, the one before. So first you said like beef had more carbon emissions, and then this one says that chickens drink more water in like California where alfalfa is produced, right?
So it gets really like the kind of accounting gets really complicated. So beef actually they consume more like per pound, but there's actually way more chickens. People eat more in terms of numbers of chickens. And so beef has a huge impact on carbon emissions, but both beef and chicken have a huge impact on water. And so that's the real impact of alfalfa, is the fact that it actually consumes so much water.
Okay, so we need to consider both water and carbon together.
And I mean, that's kind of what I chose to talk about, like the carbon and the water and the land use. But it all depends on like what your priorities are, right? Because it's really hard to be perfect, with everything. And so if you're someone who really cares about like water rights and water use, then you may prioritize that. If you care more about CO2 emissions, then you may focus more on that.
Okay, cool. Then you had a point that some areas that are right now deforested, they could be reforested. So that's that's possible?
Yeah, there's actually, I'll have to find it. There's a really great video of a guy who actually lives in Brazil, and he actually owned or he bought a small piece of land that had been deforested, and it was like the saddest piece of like dirt. It was literally just like dirt and some patchy grass. And he was able to grow the trees that used to be there. You're welcome, Lydia. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So yeah, he was able to rewild it, and a lot of actually endangered animals, a lot of different bird species, plant species moved in, and so they had to make a lot of effort to like bring in native plants and take care of them and make sure they had enough water and all of that kind of stuff. But once they got going, it's their native environment. So once they get going, they're just going to keep growing and they'll be fine. And so that whole area now is completely reforested, and it's really amazing. And there's other places where that's happened as well. So yeah, it can absolutely be done.
Cool. I'll ask one more question. I'll let y'all do more. But this is an annoying question that I get as a vegan a lot, and I don't know how to answer it. So what if we just stopped eating all of the animals as a humanity? But we now have species that are not adapted to wildlife, right? Like cows and, I don't know, chickens. And I actually have no idea how they're going to do, or if we're just going to, eat, I guess, enough to and then not eat the ones that preserve the species and then like let them be. So anyways, it's a really dumb theoretical question, but I don't know how to answer it because I've been asked like, oh, what do you do with those animals? Like they can't survive on their own.
Yeah, and I think this is, overall, I would say that being vegan and being interested in like environmental impacts, they mostly align. But I think there's some cases where, if you have a high emissions animal and a whole industry associated around those animals. Yeah, I've had people ask me like, well, what would we do with the cows if we didn't eat them? They could live out their natural lives, which is way longer than 2 years, way longer than 2 years. And so, that's a question that I think at an individual level, people would have to decide, like from their values. Do you care more about animal rights, or do you care more about, about the environment? Because it is true that if the cows were living longer and you just kind of let them hang out, yeah, they would be continuing to burp and fart, just like the ones that are here now. But the fact is, factory farming, like a lot of cows are forcibly impregnated and they produce baby cows at an unnatural rate, like constantly. That's part of why the lifespans are so short. So I think the population would not stay that high for very long because they wouldn't be producing an unnatural number of new cows all the time. So I actually feel like there's a middle ground where they could live out their lives, but the numbers would go down a lot quicker than people think they would.
I love that answer. I'm gonna have to write that down because that's like a very scientific answer. And you're right, like they're forcibly impregnated until they die, basically. So yeah, they probably would have just a couple of babies like dogs or cats or whoever else. Otherwise, yeah, awesome. Okay, I'm gonna shut up now and let you guys ask questions.
I had like a few things to say. One interesting question, Katya. One other thing to think about is like there's a lot of cows per unit area, and that would like if they were just like, okay, cows, now go do your thing, they'd not be that squished. They'd expand, and then there would be like, most things just die because of bad habitat, and that's what would happen to those cows that are no longer employed for food. But yeah, the question that I had was, you have all of this information about foods and their carbon emission. Do you know anything about the carbon emission of just water? Just like filtering water to drink? Not that I'm suggesting you reduce your water consumption, just by the way, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I actually looked at that. I made a judgment call not to include the carbon emissions of specifically filtered and bottled water. There was actually a number there, and it was actually in the same range as, I want to say, the beer and carbonated beverages that I had earlier. So it was actually pretty high, and and I'm sorry, my camera, like the built-in camera, is really low, so I'm trying to like keep you guys from looking at my nose, but I apologize for the weird angle. But anyway, the carbon emissions for the bottled water was actually, a lot higher than I would have thought, and I imagine most of that is from transport, like the emissions due to loading it on trucks and transporting it around, and potentially a good part of it is packaging. But I also know, like, I'm in Michigan, I'm like less than an hour away from Flint, where they had the water crisis, and it's continuing, where the municipal water is literally contaminated. I don't want anyone to feel bad for having to drink bottled water, frankly.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting this, I'm just curious. So.
Yeah. So yeah, it does have a carbon footprint. But yeah, I didn't include it.
Thanks.
I know we're past 7 Eastern. So feel free to ask more questions later if something else comes to you. I'm happy to talk about whatever.
Yeah, that was a really awesome presentation. I would really enjoy if you shared it in our group chat on Total Body Lab. So we have the data to tell the people they are giving us some crap.
Yeah, and people, like I said before, I don't want anyone to feel bad if culturally they eat something that's not vegan or whatever. That's why I'm very upfront about me being vegan, and I know I have a bias there, but I think it's important for people to know, even if you choose not to be fully vegan or vegetarian or whatever, that you can still reduce your carbon footprint substantially. And that's very empowering, I think.
Yeah, you're right. Also, you guys probably don't know, but Lydia actually works in water treatment. We talked about that because my startup before I started Total Body Lab was also in water treatment. So I empathize on the issue a lot. And one of the reasons why I didn't go forward with it and I folded the company was because we couldn't figure out how to do it best to disinfect the water and then distribute it, because that causes huge, insane emissions, like you said, Julie, or have little stations kind of all over the country and have people, get to their water sanitation or water disinfection and get it from there. And we just couldn't figure it out, or I couldn't figure it out. So that's an existing problem.
Yeah. Well, maybe Lydia can give the next presentation.
So I would love that. Yeah, we can have a presentation on water and just freak out day and night after we hear about what happens to water. Cool. Well, this was awesome. Like you said, it's 7 Eastern. So we got to wrap, but thank you so much for joining. Thank you for a really informative presentation. Folks are going to watch it on recording and hopefully ask you more questions if they have those. But for now, I'm going to remove y'all from stream. And thank you again for coming. Bye, Michelle and Carol. Bye, Harsh. Bye, Julie. Thank you guys for tuning in for the Total Body Lab bi-weekly friends and clients chat. As you have seen, we have a lot of interesting people who do a lot of interesting things outside of eating healthy, try to get stronger, and lift weights. But that is a passion that unites us all. So if you are interested in those things, please join us on Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn Live every other Thursday. Or you're welcome to go to my social media at Gorbacheva E on Instagram or TotalBodyLab.com and ask me any questions that your heart desires. But for now, we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye.